missing? Anyone? Nope, I think we're looking pretty good. Oh, Guy hadn't come back. Oh, well, you might have shot the gap. That's all right. Right, we'll just get back into things, guys. We'll have the confirmation of the minutes. Any questions about the minutes at all?
No, just comment in relation to the minutes
Oh, just get you to pop your mic.
Sorry.
So, just checking, just letting the people online know we're back into things. But, that's all cool.
Yeah, no, just in relation to 7.1 of the minutes, and it was quite heartening to know that when this around living wage, that this was resolved by this committee, that it went to full council and it wasn't relitigated there. So, because there'd been, we've had
Maureen did such a great job.
well, she did a brilliant job actually, yeah. But so I would, all I'm saying really is that I think greater effect is being given to the decisions that are made by the committees.
Oh, look, and
as indeed it should be. I mean, there was one there where I think the other, it's not called Environment Committee, whatever it's called, where that got sort of like really just completely, a decision got re-litigated. It didn't help that the chair actually moved some amendments to their own motion, but anyway, just noting that.
No, look, appreciate that, Nigel. And look, to me, I guess that's reiterating the point that both this and that committee are, to me, they're workhorse committees. We're a workhorse committee. Argy-bargy, if you've got things that need to be talked to or things you want clarified, we can really dig down into things in this one so that by the time they do elevate up, a lot of those sort of things can be potentially addressed. Look, I'm always a firm believer that, councillors around the table have the right to relitigate as such, but I think also that ties into the fact we're getting workshops that are relevant to this information, things like asset management plans. And a lot of this sort of work is all coming together quite nicely with regards to a cohesive approach to things as we move forward. I've found things to be quite disjointed in the past. I think this seems to be working quite well, and I think it'll get better. I'm looking forward to, and again, I'm picking that we'll have, this has been a relatively light one, and it's been great because Mike's been able to push through a couple of asset management plans, and we'll see a few of those come through quite quickly over the next couple of meetings as such. But I think in the new year, I think there's a little bit of a hiatus at the moment, waiting to see what's happening with the elections, and then there could be some stuff that we get the opportunity to chew into in the new year as such, which we've had a lot of stuff in train with this particular committee, and we've been able to sort of, tap it and finish it off sort of thing, but it'd be quite nice to get into some topics where we're actually there right from the beginning, so to speak. I'm sure Rob's very much looking forward to that in the housing space. So no, appreciate the comment. That is noted. Thank you, Nigel. Okay, so I have a mover for that. Do I have a seconder? Kathy, thank you very much. You want to comment on anything around that, Nigel?
No, just that was
flagged. Any other debate? Nope. Then all those in favour? Aye. Fantastic. That's great. Now, I fundamentally moved what would have been 6C up with regards to members' business, just pretty much for members reporting as such. Look, from my perspective, generally, what I'm trying to do is line up a councillor in different areas. Kathy, you're involved in the health space on those committees, older persons as such. Rob, housing, that's an area you're in as such. And I just had a good chat with Lawrence recently with regards to the social sector as such. And of course, Lawrence has got a long affiliation in the social sector, so I've asked him to sort of perhaps give us a little bit of a chat about where he sees things sitting in that space. And what would be quite nice is that I'd like to sort of, as we move forward, maybe you'll be able to touch base briefly on a little update on health, or Rob, you might be able to give a little update on the housing space, and Lawrence, a little update on the social things. Not a big convoluted sort of scenario, just sort of things that have maybe happened in the last month that you think might be interested in being aware of. Because again, part of what I see around this committee is us having the awareness of what's going on in the different areas. And if the people that are focusing on there can perhaps bring our attention to things that we might find that it's worth us knowing about, if you like, knowing what's coming up, then we can prepare ourselves a little bit in those spaces as well. Nigel, I take into account that you're quite heavily involved in the alcohol side of things. Um, that's entailing quite a lot of work, and I like the approach you brought in that space, which is a very responsible approach with regards to. I know you've called meetings when they haven't been asked for because of concerns in relation to our community. So I do applaud you for that. That is much appreciated. And I was also thinking, Nigel, that you've talked about the Citizens Advice Bureau and some other agencies that looking at how we're bringing that into the long-term plan, because I think that's a general consensus shared by the table as well. But Lawrence, if you could perhaps have a chat to us about the social sector, would be much appreciated.
Thanks, Martin. Sure. So probably, as always, I'll start with a declaration of conflict in this space because I'm involved with a trust that is funded by council for the work that we do in this the community and social sector. So let's just make that clear to start with. But I will give a bit of an update on where things are at across our sector. So when I talk about the social and community sector, it's quite a broad definition, which includes organisations that provide social services in our district and also organisations that have a community purpose to them that don't necessarily provide a straight up social service or a program or something like that. So, for example, when I talk about the social and community sector, I am including groups like the Men's Shed, and others that have a little bit, and sometimes even, we also are involved with the Waikanae Museum, other groups that are involved and have community outcomes and impact into our community and involve volunteers that are working in the space, but don't necessarily do a service in our district. So that's probably really important to understand that the depth of the social and community sector. It's often easier to work in the sector with those that are providing social services because they often have employees and managers and people that are paid to do some of the work that they're doing. And that is probably, and a lot of the community side ones are often run fully by volunteers. So there's a bit of an overlap. All the services organisations will have volunteers involved as well somewhere, but they do have staff on the ground that are working. So it's often when you're talking about our sector, there's quite a broad category of who that touches. One of the challenges that we've faced, and I think is an ongoing challenge for us, is the level of cooperation, collaboration, and even awareness of what other groups are doing within our community. And that is the work that my trust is involved with, along with Volunteer Kapiti, is in trying to build that cohesion and sense of us being a sector together with our identity and a shared vision, and a plan for moving forward in terms of how we represent our sector into the places that need to be represented. So rather than so, for example, what we're going to be doing is coming up, obviously, as councillors and as council, we're running our Vision Kapiti work and our priorities. So one of the things that we're working on as a sector at the moment is submitting as a sector into that work. So instead of every organisation's able to do it, but if we can bring a cohesive voice from our sector that says, these are the things that we really want to see in our vision work. These are the things that we would see are important from our perspective and the things we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. That voice is heard around this council table, at this committee, and also from there into central government around and funders around where funding is being targeted within our communities. So that's the work that's currently going on. Is we have been working pretty closely with a group, including representative from Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai in a working group that has been looking at what's going on around New Zealand in terms of pulling a sector together with shared vision and values and sense of identity, learning some of those lessons and then bringing it into our context and going, okay, so what would it look like in Kapiti with our our variety and diversity of our communities. How could we pull that together to ensure that one that we're aware of what's going on, and two, that we're being really proactive and responsive to the needs within our community as those change. So that particular smaller group, which has been about 6 or 7 people, including council staff that have been part of that work, that is now being broadened. So we're now inviting a wider group of stakeholders, key organisations, into that space to go, okay, this is what we've begun to develop in terms of a framework and a vision for our community and social sector. What do you think? And so that work is taking place over the next couple of months of broadening it to involve wider key stakeholders, key groups in that space. One of the exciting things out of that is there is a developing connection into that space with Nahapu from Otaki as well now. So originally we just had Te Atiawa's voice, but now Nahapu is coming into that space as well. So that's also exciting. So I will be there will be an invitation to our chair to come to that next meeting to be part of that hui around, are we heading in the right track around what our community and social sector needs. So it's quite exciting. I think we're pretty excited that we should be able to land something sort of in towards mid next year in terms of getting some stuff out that then becomes a little bit more public, if you like, in terms of the wider span. Our sector does know that this work is going on, so we've tried really hard through our networks to get out and let people know that the Capable Sector Project, this vision work, is happening. So there is an awareness across our sector. It's not something that's just here. We're just working with people that are available, that have got capacity to work in this space at the moment. Yeah, so that's a bit of an update.
I appreciate that. It's interesting. I appreciate that you declare the conflict, Lawrence, but I think actually the community's quite fortunate to have you in this space with regards to your understanding and your involvement in it for a very long time. So I think having you at the table and for you putting your hand up to be at the table, because I know it was a very conflicting process with regards to the work you can do out in the community. I think we're very fortunate to have you here, so I really do appreciate the update.
Sure, absolutely.
We're on. Okay.
Oh, sorry, Nigel, off your phone.
Right. It can open up now. So who coordinates this? Is there a central coordinating person, or is is it actually called the Capable Sector Project? That is the title.
So officially that's what it's called. That's what we're funded in. And so the work itself is held by a collaboration between Kapiti Impact Trust and Volunteer Kapiti. Okay, so so that's where the work is held, and then we have shoulder tapped initially these people to work in this working group, and out of the funding that we've received, we fund those individuals to come to those meetings and be part of that and add their knowledge into that space. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And presumably at some stage is there going to be a report or a state of play or some recommendations about the where to from here, like even in terms of formalising some group, and then maybe whatever the funding implications might be.
Yep. So one of the things that and this is part of the vision work, is talking about who holds that place in the future, because both KIT and Volunteer Kapiti are very aware that this is a sector-wide piece of work that we happen to have received some funding to facilitate, but we may not be involved in that core role moving forward. So that's part of this conversation, is what do we want this to look like in the future? Because at some stage, someone or a group of people have to hold the vision and the voice for our sector. And so that's the bit that will require a bit of work. I know in terms of the funding, there's some reporting back that's due the end of this month from both Volunteer Kapiti and KIT as a report back to Council on our funding outcomes. So that's coming, and you will see that, I assume, be able to access that from our staff in terms of that reporting back, which is the annual reporting on funding and outcomes and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Oh, cool. No, thanks.
Look, I will note there as well, and just for clarifying, Lawrence, in the Social Sustainability Fund, as such, we funded this particular piece, or partially funded this piece of work. But also in the previous long-term plan, there was, not in the previous long-term plan, in the previous round of social sustainability, there was a piece of work done just on identifying different groups in the sector as well. Then that's followed on to this bit of funding working towards building capacity in the sector. Is that correct? Oh. And I think Morag might want to actually have a...
I was just going to say, so this is part of the social investment funding, that the round that went through last year that was agreed. So it's a 3-year funding contract. I believe it's $80,000 a year towards Kapiti Impact Trust and Volunteer Kapiti to undertake the capable sector work. There is annual reporting requirements that do happen with that, and that will be coming next quarter. Coming up. So you will be able to see all of that report back as well. As with all of the contracts that are under that, they do report back annually. And yes, this is phase 2. So there was previous work done around this as well.
Thanks for that, Morag. I'm just curious, from a process with regards to that reporting back coming in, does that come in via this community, or does that go straight to SOFT or council as such?
So if you cast your mind back to the 12th of March meeting, actually, for this subcommittee, there was a request through that we would find a way to work with the SOF to bring that information through the subcommittee beforehand. So we would be looking at how we can do that appropriately. So this subcommittee does have oversight of that as well.
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little bit, I'm not concerned, I suppose is the word, is that I think we've got to be a little bit careful not to end up double handling, so to speak. It slows the process down. If it's just appropriate to go to SOFT, it potentially doesn't have to come through here because we'll all be there anyway, and it's not necessarily something that a piece of work we're working on. It's more of that, the report back sort of scenario. So I'm just open to us having to think about that as well if required. If bringing it here is slowing that process down or makes it a little more difficult, then I'm not precious about it as such. And views on others would be, Lawrence, do you want to add to that, or? Oh, no, it's not just a little weird thing going on.
I was just going to add that that's something that I can work with Mike and yourself as chair on in terms of what would be the most appropriate way for that to happen, but to make sure that the subcommittee is aware as is appropriate.
No, that'd be much appreciated. Kathy.
Thank you. I've been around here long enough to know that things go round and round in circles. And Lawrence, you you reminded me, and I don't know if it's the same now, but the same thing happened about 20 or so years ago, that there were a lot of smaller community groups running the same types of service. I mean, someone asked me once, did I know any alcoholics? Because we need bums on seats to get our funding. So they were all kind of after the same funding, but many different organisations, smaller groups, trying to get their funding and trying to get people. So are they kind of scattered like they used to be? And then they brought them together so that, 1 or 2 groups were doing, working with alcoholics and not a half a dozen. So what's the scene like out there now? Is it kind of scattered and you're trying to bring it together, or?
It depends on the area you're talking about, but yes, there is still a bit of scattered and still a bit of, there are a lot of organisations working in Kapiti of varying sizes and effectiveness, and a decreasing amount of funding available. So I think the biggest part of this work is, and I think the realistic conversation that we need to have is, how do we reduce the number of organisations and partner people together so that we get better outcomes? So one of the things that Martin and I had a really good conversation about yesterday was the big shift that needs to take place in terms of what you're talking about, which is an output of bums on seats so that I can get my funding, to outcomes-based reporting So we're looking at, instead of we had 20 people come to a workshop, what was the outcome for each of those 20 people as a result of that workshop? And that outcome may take 6-12 months to outwork itself, because you might have learnt about sustainable funding, for example. We need to be able to measure the outcome so that we can see that an organisation has transitioned from this point where they're fragile as an organisation in terms of funding to a point where they've got sustainable funding. That's the outcome you want from that workshop, not the fact that someone attended. So that's the shift that we're trying to work at within our sector and that's a voice we need to communicate to our funders too, because there's still quite a bit of funding that is assigned according to output, and we know for a fact that some of those outputs, can I say that here? Yeah. We know for a fact that some of those output are fudged to ensure that funding is returned, or they're able to get more funding. And the outcomes, the amount of money that is spent in our sector at times for a lack of an outcome is a little bit scary. And so that's one of the conversations that we're having regularly across our sector and with this group, is how do we encourage our sector to be more outcomes focused? That includes the funding that comes to us, that it's measuring outcomes and reporting on outcomes. That is one of the good things about this particular project and the work that council staff have done in this space around this particular piece of the funding from social investment funding. It is way more outcomes focused in terms of what we're reporting on. The problem with that is it's really hard to measure sometimes. The outcomes, yeah.
It was really just, the smaller groups trying to keep their groups going, even though they, for their funding, and wanting to get the people there, because there was a minimum of people you had to get the funding, and there was so many groups doing it that they needed to come together to, work together. So that sounds good.
Thanks, Kathy.
Nigel.
Yeah, there was actually a database on KCDC's website up until about, I think it was about 12, 13 years ago, where social service organisations were all listed in contacts with there were 300 of them. It was a fantastic resource, but there were 300. Now that's probably shrunk down a bit, but when you start digging, you find out just how many of these groups are there, and some of them are very small. There's a lot of support groups for various things that are out there that they all fly below the radar. So hopefully, if you've got a process that picks that up, because I worked many moons ago for the New Zealand Federation of Voluntary Welfare Organisations, and just to the idea of outputs, there was a budget for there was a budget of $1.7 million that came from the ministry to hold hui around the country to find out where the social sector was at. It was fantastic. So we ran these hui around and spent the 1.7 million, and absolutely nothing happened. We had meetings to find out what was happening, but now there was no resource to actually do something about what we found out what was happening. So that's Lawrence's point, I think, isn't it? It's really important. You can spend a lot of money finding out what the state of play is, and then there's no money to do anything about it. And so, as Jackie was saying, you come back and here we are again, deja vu all over again.
Do you want to comment on that at all?
Oh, it's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely massive, and quite a big shift in thinking for people from, particularly if your organisation is dependent on funding for survival. A lot of passionate people out there and doing some fantastic work in our community. But when your funding is dependent on particular outputs, you end up being skewed towards, my vision's going to no longer exist if I don't get that funding. So that puts a lot of pressure on stuff and on people, particularly if you're earning income from that.
Yeah.
Those are challenging conversations to be had. But I think we have to have them as a district, because we do have pockets in this district that are very vulnerable and at risk, and we need to improve and increase our responsiveness to the people that are in those positions.
Yeah, look, I just wanted to add to that. CAG has got a website in regards to not necessarily all the social groups that are out there, but more on the lines of the medical services that are available on the Kapiti Coast. And I know in the previous bit of work, a directory was put together. But again, the key there is for that ongoingness, the ability to have that all centralised in one spot, funded to be maintained, and that sort of stuff, rather than having lots of these little different things dotted around the place. That sort of stuff. And I guess the flip side to that, and Chris will be able to help me out with this one, is of course you're talking about all the local on the ground volunteer agencies. We're also in the process of talking around how, like Ministry of Social Development and all those other sorts of agencies, how they are working in a coordinated or lack thereof way in the area as well. Perhaps you want to comment on that, Chris?
Sure. Yeah, and I should say, looking at Community Board member Jackie Elliott across the table, off the back of our Otaki Safety Symposium and bringing together all of the, in fact, I think if it's not all, it's most of them, the social sector and some of the justice sector to talk about safety in the community. And also the follow-up, who we had here around youth safety, that the Mayor had been responding to an issue in the community. We have been bringing central government agencies together, and I think that there has been a real interest in continuing those conversations and getting together more with us. So I actually... I was called rather than calling someone else. So MSD called me because they had been thinking about the opportunity to work differently between some of their other agency partners. So they're busy trying to think about how they respond to some of the issues that were raised. And I think that's a really important and special thing, because that doesn't always happen. So I say kudos to our regional partners, and not just the ones that come from Wellington, but the ones that also go up to Central. So I think one of the unique things that we have in our district is we have more than one region focused in our community. And I think the opportunity to bring that together alongside working with, sort of, I'm going to say from the ground up, and maybe what I'm seeing as a top-down coming together, would be a really powerful thing going forward. And so we'll be looking at not just one agency being able to do that, but how we get that sort of cohort together. And you'd expect nothing less from me. I brought up the issue of recovery, particularly around housing, and how MSD could be involved and what their plans were and how we'd work together so that they can actually bring some options to the table around that as well. So we're trying to do a bit more joining up and getting them to see some of the challenges at our end. And I do want to say that community boards getting involved and helping to tell that story is a really vital part of that, actually, as well as obviously with councillors coming around that too, because I think the reason we've had so much engagement from central government is they're seeing the involvement of elected members as it being representative of the community, which I thought was another really great thing as well. So I did say that when I was reporting back on with Jackie around this, and I mentioned it, that the youth symposium as well, that elected members being involved matters. It shows that we are interested in something. And I think we need to keep that engagement going.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Much appreciated. Jackie.
Related to this, but on a different issue, this is about, what I want to talk to you about is how elected members are seen to be doing this mahi, and how we have been traditionally doing the mahi in Kapiti, and that has been elected members, especially on community boards, being invited to be part of these community volunteer groups on their actual working committee. And Otaki Community Board, for instance, we have about six appointments each, 5 or 6 each. Nice. And we've got to get round all these groups. Now, as you may or may not be aware, I'm a Zone 4 representative on CBEC, and we, at our last meeting last month, invited the Remuneration Authority members to come to our meeting, and we spoke about this. We spoke about our job description, and of course and I'm happy to say this publicly, that it was shocking lack of remuneration for community board members who are very hardworking and engaged in their communities. They had no idea whatsoever that we would ever be asked to be asked to take up appointments for volunteer groups in communities anywhere in New Zealand, and consequently we are not remunerated to do so. So hence I see the importance of forums where we, like other members, can walk in the room and then walk away until such a time as the Remuneration Authority corrects and starts raising the remuneration for community board members in accordance to what work we do. That was just one of the issues that they were unaware of that that we're doing. So just quickly, CBEC have organised, LGNZ have provided us with a survey company, and we're putting together a survey for all community board members in New Zealand, a time and motion survey, so that we can give the RA proper up-to-date analysis, data on what it is that we actually do for their consideration. They acknowledge that they realised that we were underpaid and our job description was completely irrelevant 5 years ago, and that they acknowledge they've done nothing about it ever since. They just say, oh, we're waiting for the LG review. And this has been quite a good update, Lawrence, and I'm just wondering if, while you're here, if you could perhaps think about any elected member briefings or workshops that are coming up that I might be able to just sit down with all the community board members and EMs at one point and give a wee report on an update from CBEC to the table. Just have a think about that and let me know if you think there's anything coming up that would be suitable for me to slot in. Because this is really good stuff about how we do our stuff well for the community.
Thank you for that, Jackie. And look, I've always been hot on the topic around remuneration. As such, quick question I do have though, you talk about 5 or 6 appointments each. Is that a delegated authority, or is that just something that the community board elects to do in relation to being involved in its community?
They are called on the list when we were first elected this time round, the delegated
You've
positions.
got that many?
Yeah, that many, 5 or 6 each.
Wow.
And there was recently a new group set up, and they said straight away, and we would like a community board member to be appointed to this group. And I've got another new one given to me just 2 months ago.
Interesting.
As well.
Because I don't think that's consistent across the district with regards to that. We don't have one in
I
the...
think it's like the volunteer groups have come to expect that they can have a community board member at their beck and call.
Interesting. I guess interesting because I want to say that because I've mentioned previously that I'm lining up councillors with regards to different areas. I specifically hadn't done that with community boards because, in my opinion, community boards are out there working in the community as such, and remuneration-wise, I don't think that's that level of work, or if you like, ties into the committee. But great to see that sort of commitment and that happening out in the communities as such, and very much interested in hearing back from community board members things that are going on in their communities that they might find of interest to us. Which leads me on to something else I just wanted to check.
Can I just quickly ask Jackie a question? Can you excuse my ignorance? What does CBEC stand for?
That is the LGNZ Community Board Executive Committee of a zone met from each zone. So there's about 6 of us. One of them has got 2 people in the position, so 7 of us around the country.
And just for clarity, Jackie, you're representing Kapiti in that space, is that
no,
correct?
Wellington region.
Wellington region.
Greater Wellington, yeah.
That's awesome. Something I just wanted to put past people. We have a public speaking time from 9 till 9:30. Would there be an interest for us to invite some community groups in, or some areas in, to perhaps just do a little 10-minute presentation to us about what it is that they are doing in the community as such, if they are interested? Would we be open to that as such? I mean, sort of getting here at 9 rather than 9:30. I could do it at the beginning of the meeting, but generally our meetings are usually full, so if we were going to have that sort of report back, it'd be quite nice to do it in that half hour of public speaking, public forum, I dare say. Yeah, I think we've had them in, Generally, people okay with that?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it, but just 9 o'clock, I'm not sure why council meetings were changed to 9:30, but the congestion around Paraparaumu and Kapiti at the moment is just for 9 o'clock, it's the schools going. We've got all these schools around here and all the school traffic. I can't even hardly get out of my street. Like, if I come to 9:30, I've got to get out of my street 8:30 to come to 9:30 meeting, or I won't get here. I'm just wondering about the time, or
I look at
I'm not sure, but I support what you're saying.
yeah, I haven't had a look at the forward calendar, to be honest, because sometimes our meetings are in the afternoons as well. But we can play it by ear a little bit and see how it goes. We've got to get some interest in it as well. Hopefully, in 6 weeks' time, the congestion might be a little bit different as well. And I guess even with the community boards, I mean, I've got Mike, who was from Waikanai, who was quite hot on the transport stuff. So it's trying to form a sort of working group around that, which we'll work on as well. Sorry, boom, boom, boom. Lighting's going to talk to us. Yep, that's covered. Right, has anyone else got anything that they'd like to bring up at all? Johnny?
Oh, just so you're aware that, of course, I mean, I think we're all aware that Kāinga Ora is going to be looking at developing in Raumati. So the board is setting up or trying to set up, or has sent out letters to the Raumati community for expressions of interest for a community liaison group, because
that's great.
As we're aware, Kāinga Ora has sort of, in other areas, have not sort of engaged with the community, and it sort of hasn't gone down too well. So hopefully we can get something that's going to, get the best out of the situation that we're in at the moment.
Oh, look, I think that's critically important, Johnny. We know Kāinga Ora have underinvested in this area. We've got statistical information on that. That came from our housing needs assessment. But what we don't want to see is Kāinga Ora coming in with a very closed mind with regards to how they integrate into our community. That's all very well and fine bringing people from the outside in here, but we do need to be looking after our own as well. So how their attitude as they come into the district, I think, is going to be very, very important. I think Chris is potentially working on those sort of relationships as well, but great initiative from your community board.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I've worked on the community liaison group for the Expressway, and we actually had some good wins for the community there. So these groups actually do actually work. So
it's local democracy working very, very well. No, it's great to see.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to reiterate the importance of the both at community level and council level, that when Kāinga Ora or any developer, and in this regard, Kāinga Ora just another developer, when they're coming in and they're going to be building houses, that they may not be as mindful of the necessary infrastructure that's required or the impact that their development will have on current infrastructure, and it's kind of our role to point that out to them, right? So, for instance, the one down in Raumati where, I mean, I'm not going to say that they were ignorant of it, but they didn't seem to be 100% aware of what the impact of the numbers moving in there might be on the local school that was already full. Right, and so with any of these things, so that, it's great. You build lots of houses, that's fantastic. But if those houses are going to include, they're not retirement villages, they're going to have school-age kids. Where are those kids going to go to school? What doctors are they going to be able to go to? Because all of our medical centres are now full. You have to go on a waiting list, even if you're a resident. So it's great that we're going to, you've got to bring in people, knock yourself out. But they have to be aware of it, and at a community level, it's the best place to raise it, because you guys know what the particular concerns are in that area, right?
It's a very, very good point, Nigel. I think through our growth strategies and structural plans that we're going to be looking at, it'll be good to address that through there, as that broader picture. And I guess, Johnny, also something to consider is that Kāinga Ora build houses, but it's also who are the agencies that put people in those houses, which could be Ministry of Social Development as well.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the people that we are trying to sort of engage with are the schools and the local businesses and of course the affected residents that are going to be in that area. So it's the whole of Raumati actually. So while it's only in one place, it's going to have impacts on the whole of Raumati anyway.
And look, good for being a trailblazer in that space. Johnny, your community board, hopefully it's stuff that we can template potentially from other community boards as well. No point reinventing the wheel, so to speak. Cool. Rightio. Time to finish the meeting. Do we have a specific process for that? No, but I'm going to do a closing karakia, and then we can all have a cup of coffee while we wait for lunch. No? And lunch is ready. Fantastic. Even better. We can send a note out to the other councillors to get here early. Tutawa mai I raro, tutawa mai I roto, tutawa mai I wahu. Kia toa, kia tau a te Māori, tū te Māori ora ki te katoa. Humai, huie, tākie. I will practice this one to get it flowing a little bit better. But I summon from the above, I summon from below. I summon within and the surrounding environment. The universal vitality and energy to infuse and enrich all present, unified, connected, and blessed. Thank you very much for your attendance today. Please enjoy lunch and hope you have a fantastic weekend.